Cool. So this is the Tempo community call, May 2022. And we're a week late. We normally do it the second week of the month, but we're a week late this time because we had an offsite for the company and everybody was not at their desks, and it was just going to be a little bit difficult to do the normal thing. So instead, we pushed it a week, and I'm glad to see people still showed up, and we'll have some good discussion, hopefully. I'm going to start by putting a new member of the team on the spotlight here. Kim, you're welcome to say nothing since I have not talked to you about this before now. But Kim is our newest member of the team. She's a docs writer. She's going to help us improve all of our documentation, both for open source Tempo and for enterprise Tempo. Kim, if you want to say something, introduce yourself, feel free, but don't feel obligated if you just want to hang out some.
I'm happy to be here and to help contribute to making the documentation a little bit better and more comprehensive.
And we need it. Thanks, Kim. She's already been super impactful. I see her jumping in PRs, giving our ideas, giving thumbs up for some of these docs we've been doing, adding some good suggestions. So we're very excited to have Kim around. I think she's going to do some good things for the team and for Tempo. Cool. Like I said, other than this, it's pretty... Welcome, Kim. Glad to have you. Other than this, it's pretty laid back. We're going to move through some of these topics, and I'm going to have Kunrad do this next thing. He's going to talk about 1.4 and 1.4.1, which was cut since our last community call. So Kunrad, why don't you wax poetic about that?
Yeah, sure. So in the last community call, we already announced we were cutting or planning to cut Tempo 1.4. In the meantime, this has happened like a couple of weeks ago. So we released 1.4, and then we also released 1.4.1 with a couple of bug fixes. I've linked the release notes. You can check out all the changes in the different releases. But yeah, I mean, we recommend using 1.4.1, of course. There's also a blog post, but like to give a quick summary of this release, the major new feature in this release is the metrics generator. So there's a new component we added to Tempo, which can generate metrics from the traces that are being ingested by Tempo. So these metrics are based upon your traces. We have two types of them: spam metrics and service graphs. Spam metrics is kind of like your typical red metrics, so rate, error, and duration about every span. And service graphs is kind of what we do there is we analyze the traces to extract topology information about your system and the services, how they interact with each other. And then we get a metric so we can visualize this in Grafana, so you can see which services are talking with each other and how much calls they're sending, what typical latency is. So the metric generator is a new component that makes this possible. If you're running Tempo in microservices modus, you'll have to add a new deployment, a new service, which is the metric generator, and you have to hook it into the ring and stuff like that. If you're running single binary, it's just the same process as usual. Yeah, and we have some documentation up on the docs page about the different processors, so do check it out. If you have any questions, leave post something in Slack. We're happy to help out. Some other highlights from this release is we also did a change to the traces endpoint, so the query endpoint. So we have an endpoint which you can supply a trace ID, and then we look for that trace in the backend. So a change here is you can now also provide a start and the end timestamp. So you can ask Tempo, hey, give me this trace, but also only look in this time range, because I know this is the interesting time range. So it's kind of like an optimization. If you know the time range of your trace, don't search the full backend, just look for this smaller time range. And besides that, we also had like a lot of changes in search and with serverless, I think. Not sure if I'm missing any other highlights for 1.4. I think those are the most important things.
Got a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah, check out the blog post with more details about the metrics generator. and the release notes also have like a list of the changes that you can go through. I think there were a couple of breaking changes. Yeah, so we changed the API between the distributor and the ingester, I think. So when you roll out this release, you should roll out the ingesters before rolling out the distributors. And there's also a performance consideration there. So, check out the documentation to see what we recommended during the rollout, because I'm not entirely sure about it anymore.
We've done this a few times, so if you've been using Tempo for a while, you might be used to this procedure, but sometimes we change the way the distributors communicate to the ingesters, and the standard procedure is to do all your ingesters first, so they have whatever that new endpoint is that the distributors expect, and then do the distributors second. So it's the same kind of process.
Yep.
If you don't, it'll just throw a bunch of errors for the rollout time and then be fine. And just refuse a bunch of spans. So that may or may not be fine, depending on what your environment is and what your expectations are of the backend and what your users expect. But yeah, I was also excited about that query range. It's something I've wanted to add for a long time. So the trace by ID endpoint has always searched every single block, which has worked up to an enormous number of traces. But I knew there would be a time where we would want to just search for us, use a subset of the blocks. And in a lot of cases, like when you're doing tempo search or other ways to find traces, you have a decent idea of the time range. So why not just chuck a couple hours on either side of your expectation, and you'll probably get the whole trace. So I think that was a cool addition, and it was a community member who threw that one in, which was also really neat. They kind of did it at the last second, and we slipped it into 1.4, and I thought that was a real good addition.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was all for the release. Do try it out and provide any feedback in Slack.
Yeah, there was one really cool thing is the metrics generator, the metrics it emits have exemplars, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so because we're receiving traces and then generating metrics from them, the example that trace will actually show up as an exemplar in the metrics that it generated, or at least some of them. So for instance, if you're looking at like the metric that's the latency for a certain service, it should have exemplars. So that's really cool. So you can just click it and go straight to some of those original traces.
That is a good point. Marty, when you chat about Parquet, I'm going to go find this demo that Heads put together. Heads is our SE guy, and he put this amazing demo together with span metrics and service graph metrics. I'm going to find that and show it off a little bit. But at the end of the call, we'll look at this and it'll show some of the exemplar stuff. It's really neat. Cool. Yeah, exemplars are super powerful, but it's hard. You have to re-instrument in some cases. You have to find a trace ID and add it to the instrumentation. It just is a pain, and as a result, it's been not very widely adopted, despite like being an extremely powerful tool. And I really like that metrics generator kind of just gives exemplars automatically to your users off the span metrics. So you just automatically get this feature. You don't have to make any changes to your code, to your instrumentation, to the way you're collecting data, to your Prometheus server. Everything's just going to work. And then you get cool exemplars and you're happy. That's all it takes. Cool. TraceQL. So TraceQL has also been a subject of discussion for the past months, frankly. But continue to make progress here. This is the query language for traces that Grafana is working on for Tempo. There's 2 PRs there. I really should have changed the order. In fact, I'm going to change the order right now because they kind of have an order to them. The first is the PR we put up a month or so ago about like core concepts, like the main ideas we want in the language. If you've not seen that, definitely check it out. And it's about a 1 to 2 pager, I think. And the idea behind it is just to talk about like the major ideas. Please give feedback there. And we've had a lot of good feedback there already. In fact, there's only one question left before we merge. And that's somebody's asking about the licensing, and I'm trying to get some answers internally about how we intend to license. I don't know if the licenses that we're used to, like Apache 2 and AGPL, make sense with regard to the spec, but we definitely want to make sure that the parser or the implementation have very clear licensing in case you're interested in using some of that code. So I'm trying to get some answers internally. It was a good question from the community, and as soon as I can get that and put that in the thread, we'll probably, I might do one more pass, clean it up, and then merge it, and then we can have that in the main code base. The second link is exciting because I just put it up today. That doesn't make it exciting, I guess, but it is exciting because it is a parser. So the parser is about 80–90% done, and it covers the full spec. The core concepts doc is not the full spec, but it gives you the main idea, and this does cover the full spec. In fact, it might even go overboard. One of my tasks to-do list is to review it again from ground up and make sure it's not too expressive, it's not too flexible, because we can only implement so much. But the parser, if you've seen grammars, uses a very familiar tool, Yak, and we specify a bunch of rules, and then it automatically generates Go code that basically parses a string, and we're going to build what's called an AST, an abstract syntax tree, out of that string. Then we can use that structure, which is the structure of the query, to go execute it against hopefully some Parquet blocks in the near future. Kind of our team is kind of headed this way from two different directions. I've been working on the TraceQL side. Marty and Ananya have been pushing hard on the Parquet side, and we have some cool announcements about that as well. If you are looking at the parser, I recommend two files in particular, xpr.y. This is all the rules. And if you look at it first, maybe it's confusing, maybe page down a bit. I think if you start reading it, it'll start to make a little bit of sense. Like the language, the Yak syntax is pretty straightforward once you start kind of digging in and thinking about it some. So even if you've not seen it, it might be fun to read a bit. It's a little bit different than your normal code. And I have had fun writing it, if I'm being totally honest. And maybe you could enjoy reading it as well. Also, another cool file to look at is just Parser Test, because this is going to show you, it's just got tons and tons of examples of queries. They're being tested, of course, against what the expected, structure to generate. But both of these files might be worth a quick skim if you're interested in the language or developing languages generally. I think those are both cool touch points to check out. But yeah, this is hopefully coming soon. We're, like I said, rapidly approaching. We're rapidly approaching Parquet in the back end. Just a parser is good, but there's still a distance between marrying up a parser and actually executing against code. I think we're going to have to come to like a decision internally about what do we support first. We're going to support a subset of this first, even if we can parse everything, and then slowly move forward and add more and more features over time. Like, so there'll be errors maybe at first, unsupported, whatever, unsupported this, unsupported that, and we'll be clear about that in documentation. Which Kim will help us with. That's right. Cool. So TraceQL is on the way. I'm really excited to finally get this parser together and get it out. I expect to merge that hopefully in the next week or so. And like I said, really trying to get some answers internally for this licensing stuff, and then we'll get the design doc in there as well. And for the entire community, for anyone, both PRs, they're public PRs, of course. We invite anyone to comment. Any thoughts or improvements, or if you just want to knit my PR a bunch, I'll make some changes. Cool. Other than that, I think that's basically the TraceQL stuff. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions there, or should we move forward?
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, informally, how excited everyone is about TraceQL. Like, fairly excited, right? And also, I was going to make a plea for heart emojis on the design proposal. We need all of them that we can get.
On the design proposal or the parser or both? I don't know. I think I just hit everyone that everyone had already hit. Can I put it? Oh man, I'm kind of disappointed in GitHub's emoji support. Like, there's like 6 or 7 here. Why can't I put like a gator or something on this? I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing. GitHub needs to get it together. Okay. Cool. Please jump into that. I am going to be begging Marty for a real review probably in the next week or so, as well as the rest of the team, to help me get it into shape. And he's going to tell me why it's going to be impossible to run against Parquet, and we'll probably make some adjustments and then go from there. Cool. And then, well, what's up?
Oh, sorry. I had a quick question. Is there a plan to leave an interface kind of like the current tempo search interface, where instead of doing TraceQL, a user could just select fields from dropdowns?
Yep. So the other languages like PromQL and LogQL kind of started with just this text box, right? And then they've kind of tried to add builders and do some of these other features. And we're kind of doing the opposite. So we have the existing UI. I really wish Connor were on because he could talk about this more officially. He's our Grafana dev. But I want it to work the opposite of that. So we already have kind of a builder. Let's just put a text box at the top. You can type in there if you want. Or if you want to just do some selections, whatever you select, we'll just write a little query for you automatically and kind of teach you the language. That's kind of our goal.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, does the simple search form, like, is that working well for you? Like, is it covering, like, what % of your use cases would you say it's covering? TraceQL is obviously going to be way more powerful.
Yeah, no, like I'm excited for TraceQL. But obviously we've got devs who, even though we use PromQL and LogQL pretty extensively, they still, they kind of only write queries maybe once a week, maybe every couple weeks. And so they're definitely not as familiar with it. So it's nice for them to just like, they know like, hey, I just want HTTP codes that are this or durations that are over this. And so it's really easy for them to be able to go and search that. We've had some other search performance issues with tempo search. I think we're still on 1.3 though. But it's still been nice though, right? Like we had an issue that we had to debug where the app wasn't emitting a trace ID into the logs, so we couldn't correlate. Like we knew there was a trace somewhere, but we couldn't find it. And before like tempo 1.3, we wouldn't be able to do that. So that little drop down, menu thing or whatever is very handy for them. But yeah, as far as like total percent of workload, I'm not sure I really know that. I mean, I probably wouldn't use it as much, but I know it would definitely get used by our team.
Cool. I'm interested to hear you're using search with 1.3 because it's not very fast. That's kind of what Marty in particular has been very focused on improving.
It's not fast, and in particular, we also basically kind of put out like a don't use the span name field, like don't click on the span name box because it will just freeze for minutes. We do a lot of span names named by API path. And also in some cases we have spans that aren't attached to a parent trace. And so the span name is like the Redis data function. There's some cleanup that we obviously have to do because like there's a span that's like and it's like it gets a little bizarre. But yeah, so there's a couple things like that we try to avoid, but doing something like finding by minimum duration, or what's funny is that you can do like by the response path attribute works really quickly. Whereas by span name, which is effectively the path, does not work. But no, it's like we knew going into it that it was very much in beta, but it's the only way that we have to kind of get those like live traces that for whatever reason we didn't log a trace ID. So cool. We like it, but yeah, it definitely needs some improvement.
Agree completely. With that, I'm going to transition to Marty, who's going to tell you exactly about improving that. Hopefully in 1.5, right, Marty?
Yeah, so the span name dropdown, like it's just really slow to populate. There's like probably 1 million entries or something. You can actually type in the tags field name equals, it's the same tag underneath. I feel like autocomplete might still get you there, but maybe if that would be another workaround to search that field if you really wanted.
That's another good reason we need Connor in here.
A lot of times we know what we're looking for. It's just getting the UI to respond that, like if somebody goes and clicks that drop down box because they know, oh, the span name, hey, I'll go search that first because I know what I'm looking for. And then it just basically freezes on them. So we just tell like, hey, just ignore this box, go put it down below in the attributes and you're golden. So
we need a config option to disable that box. Yeah, that's been tough for us too. I feel like we still struggle with that thing a lot. I think it's on Grafana's side though. I think it's just there's so many options it just bogs Grafana down. I don't know. We should talk to Connor about that and see. We should talk to Connor about that and see if he has thoughts, or we should dig a little bit on that. But yeah, we've seen slowness in that box, and I don't think 1.5 is going to fix that because I do think it's just due to the like a huge number of span names that it tries to populate there.
Yep. Yeah, cool. Hey, so we have been working on converting our block format over to Parquet. We actually just published this just after the last community call, but I think it was close. So we have a design proposal out there. So there's this first link here in the document for a Parquet schema that we think works well for tracing. In creating a schema, there's not really like one size fits all. So there's a lot of different ways you could go with Parquet. It's very flexible. There's different ways to project attributes into columns, different ways to lay out the data, even sort it, and what data types you use. So we kind of went with something that we feel like is a balancing act between block size and search speed, right? And some other factors. So there's a lot of rationale in here. You could dig through kind of like what we're going for, and maybe some other thoughts we had or directions we'd like to go in the future with it. Because we don't see this as maybe being like a set in stone schema. Like there's definitely more things we want to try here. So yeah, that design proposal is there, and read through it. I would say the main thing that we're doing in this one is we kind of thought about the common tags that are used, and we chose what we think are going to be the most common ones, and we're projecting those into their own columns. So what that means is if your data contains these tags, you'll be able to, and then when you search for that tag, it's going to be isolated to a single column. Like for instance, like service name, span name, or even things like http.url. So the normal data model, every other tag is just going to be in this key value list. So it's going to be mixed in. But if you're using these common tags, it'll be a lot more effective. So we think that will work well. I'd love to hear, other use cases or other feedback, or just in general, that kind of stuff. So that's the design proposal. Oh yeah, and I guess heart emojis, etc. Although that would be nice, but please, yeah.
I'm taking away my heart emoji now because you're begging for it.
No, I know, it's awful. So we are actually already running this internally in a development cluster. It's pretty small, at least compared to where we want to go with it. It's about 10,000 spans per second. It's not melting down catastrophically, so I'd say that's like success. So yeah, it's pretty
Like
good.
kind of melting down, just a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, sure. Yeah, we definitely have a few more things to work out. So I don't have any numbers or metrics to show here comparison-wise. It's kind of a newer cluster, new traffic load for this cluster, so I don't have before and after. But we do expect it to be more high resource usage on the ingest path. So creating the Parquet is more intensive than just our existing block format, which is just a lot of very simple protobuf bytes. But the flip side is that now it's more optimized for the read path. So yeah, so I guess not sure what else to say about that, other than yeah, definitely making some progress here.
Search will actually work. That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, in previous calls, we've done some like local benchmarking, and it's been, very promising. But yeah, now that we don't have any real world numbers yet.
Cool.
Have y'all done any testing with trying to search this using other tools? Like one of the advantages of Parquet is supposed to be like you can, like feed it through like AWS Athena, for example. Have y'all tried that yet? Or I mean,
Yeah.
not Athena specifically, but a different tool like that.
Yeah, so we are verifying that it does work with off-the-shelf tooling. So there's Parquet tools, just verifying that the file is compatible, readable. So like that's looking well. I haven't used any sort of big data tooling like that. Just it's been a while since I've worked with those, and more focused on this other stuff. Athena is definitely a really cool one that we want to support. I think to really support that well, we'll need a couple of other changes in tempo, and I'm not really sure how those will play out. But one of them, for instance, is the block file path in an S3 bucket. I know Athena works well with like the auto discoverable partitioning in the file, like the folder paths. So tempo doesn't have that right now. And then the other thing is, as we change the schema, I'm wondering how well those tools would be able to adapt to different schemas. So that's another reason in our current proposal, we kind of have this fixed schema that's kind of a little bit blend of dynamic columns, but not too many, because maybe that might be a good target for other sort of pipelines to be built on, and maybe the other kind of tricks that we want to do with maybe different columns in every block or really wide columns and things like that might not work as well. So that's kind of where we're starting. Other than Athena, like, do you use anything else?
So not at the moment. So for kind of like backups, like my interest in the use case for this is that so long story short, part of the reason why we're running Tempo is because we basically couldn't pay for all the egress for our trace and APM data. And so we used to use one of the vendor APM solutions. And when we went away with that to basically back it in-house, one of the things that we lost was like web transaction logs. And that's something that Tempo didn't do early on. Even though we capture like all the spans, we have the data in Tempo, there wasn't a way to do it by the trace ID when, before 1.3 relays or anyways. So what I ended up having to do is like get another like APM solution where I feed all of that, all the OTel data as well. And then it goes through and strips out all the, or finds all the web transactions, and then basically I just drop the rest of the trace data that I don't need that's not the web transaction. And so that system actually costs me more than the rest of Tempo does. That the Tempo does everything, and the thing that only keeps the web transactions basically costs more than what Tempo does. So I'm really looking forward to, like, one of the things I was looking at was either in-house, like put something in there that kind of dumps it into a column store like ClickHouse, or when y'all guys, announce that y'all guys are going to do the Parquet thing, then, consider like, oh, it'd be great if I could use something like Athena or, something else where I could use that same data set and then, go find the traces that would relate to a web transaction, and then just have a graph or, a table or whatever that just gives those results the way that they kind of want to look for it there. So that's what was interesting to me, is just the idea of like using the data that Tempo's already processed to present that same sort of information. So.
Yeah, that's really cool, and that's definitely something we'll have to keep in mind as we do this. That Parquet or Tempo is not the only consumer of this Parquet data. Like, we want it to work well with other tooling for sure. Could you repeat like what the? So let's say you have the bucket of Parquet and Athena. What would you be looking up? A trace ID? Or was there other correlating data?
So basically, it would be like finding traces that were HTTP transactions, and then finding, your kind of standard information from the attributes that, what path it went to, your response code, those sorts of things. And then it's basically just kind of like if your HTTP transaction was like the parent trace, just kind of like dropping all the spans that are below that is effectively what it's doing. Just kind of kind of like a log list of, there's this request came in on this pass with this code, and, etc. That's basically all we're doing. Ideally, I would like to expand it to like errors as well, right? Like you could attach the error to the trace, and then you could have transaction logs and error logs that get generated out of the trace information. And then we don't have to instrument that in two different places or multiple places. Right now, we've got a completely different solution for error handling. So that's the idea, is just to, like, I'm already pouring absolutely everything into Tempo, so it'd be nice to use that in as many places as I can instead of having to also send it out to other services.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons we were pushing so hard on Parquet is exactly what you're describing. Like, we saw so much value in the tools that exist. And I will add, it's a goal for Tempo to work with as much as possible, but we can't dog food all this. We can't test all these things ourselves. So if you do find it not working with a specific tool that you want, like, we want to hear that feedback. We want to understand why, and we want to see what we can do to bridge that gap, because there's just no way we can set all these things up and double check them against our formats and make sure they all work. So once 1.5 is out, which will probably have Parquet unless something weird happens, then we'd love to hear feedback about that. We'd love to see how it works in Athena. And I think we're going to try to do a little bit of that ourselves and do some blog posts and show off of that, because it's definitely something we want to highlight. But cheers to Marty for getting it in dev a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, it's a team effort. We've been working on this for a while, so it's good.
Yeah, it's neat to see it actually running. I went straight to the Grafana dashboards and saw what the CPU was, and saw that it wasn't instantly crashing constantly. I gave him a congratulations just for it not panicking immediately. I thought that was impressive. The maiden voyage of Parquet. Cool. I also want to share this. So I mentioned it earlier. This is built, and this might actually meet some of the needs you're talking about, Lucas. So this is all built off span metrics, which is in 1.4. So none of these are metrics generated by an application. None of these are custom metrics. These are all generated from the traces that are sent through Tempo. And then we generate the metrics and push those to a remote write endpoint. But you can see we have like request rates by endpoint, latencies, error rates, and this is all fancy. I don't personally like gauges and such, but it looks cool, doesn't it, for a demo? Head set this up, by the way. I really wish you were on here to give you a better demo than I can. It does amazing things. Not only that, but we have like top 10 slowest endpoints. So we can maybe really quickly dig in and see if something is worse than it should be. He even set up these awesome searches so I can immediately jump over to a search based on, the endpoint that was there. So this is a Grafana table. He's got the links set up so I can jump here. And of course, now I can add more parameters. Maybe I only want to see things longer than 100 milliseconds or a second or whatever. So really cool features here. Exemplars. So we were talking about remote write, or the metrics generator creates exemplars. So this is kind of a bunch of stuff slammed into one, a lot of different endpoints you can see. But you could break this out. We could, you of course use Grafana templating to select individual endpoints, but I have exemplars now. So I can see this guy, apparently they're everywhere. I can pick this one up here. It's a particularly latent endpoint or a particularly latent query. I can go query with Jet. Apparently this is set up for enterprise, but I can jump immediately over to the trace, right? I had an exemplar. I'm now on the trace. The log links are here. I have kind of all of my observability signals set up in one. I really love what Conrad and Mario have done over the past few months building the metrics generator. Like this adds so much value to the traces that are pushed through Tempo if you take some time to set this up. So this shows kind of like the high end of what can be done if you spend some time with it, but it's so valuable and it's so cool. So congratulations to them as well. Have you seen this, Conrad?
Yeah, it's a really nice demo. It's really well done by heads as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Is this linked to the same thing? Yeah, just the search. Yeah, it's just the same search. I thought maybe it added some duration stuff, but it doesn't. Okay. But yeah. So I'm excited about this. I think this is neat. And this is all just standard Grafana stuff, right? So if I go to edit, it's just going to be a Prometheus query based on the span metrics created by Tempo.
Yeah, so this demo uses Jet, but the metrics generator is all, these are all open source features.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Well, I think that's roughly what we have. I'd love to address anything else from the people on the call. If anybody has questions about anything we've talked about or just about Tempo or, life, I suppose, feel free to check them in chat. Or if you want to unmute and ask something. Yeah, it'd be fun to talk about whatever. And if not, then we can go our separate ways. Oh, thanks, Fausto. Appreciate that. Yeah, that dashboard is all the work of Conrad and Mario on the back end and our SE heads, who sometimes joins these calls. I wish he was here to hear the praise, but he's extremely good SE and he does a lot of great work. But he put that demo together and it's super cool. Cool. Well, if it's time to be on our way, I appreciate y'all showing up. And we'll be doing this in a month. And I think ObservabilityCon is coming up as well. We're going to do a demo there as well. It's going to be a lot of these same things. We're going to show off some new UI for metrics generator. We're going to have more data on Parquet, hopefully more like high level like performance data at larger scales, both on search and like how much more CPU and memory it takes. And maybe TraceQL will make a few steps as well. But we're excited to talk about that at observability. Oh, sorry, it's GrafanaCon. We have two conferences. It's hard to remember. It's GrafanaCon, and it's about a month or so, I think. So look out for that. And if you want, jump in our session, and you'll see a lot of the same things. It'll be a little bit flashier, though, I think. And there'll be a Q&A. Cool. All right, everybody have a great month, and we will see you when we see you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.